Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us. The power's only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Ooh. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. Brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. And I hope someday join us, and the world will live as one. Right. So the song Imagine was written by John Lennon from the Beatles, and he was assassinated a long time ago. Maybe not for this song, but he was assassinated, we believe, for many other reasons, which we won't go into. So this song is about dreaming about the future. It's not about the present. It's about what the world could be with imagination. Now, I come from, I'm a professor in a B school. So I teach, of course, I teach subjects that are the usual subjects we teach in a B school, but I also teach their imagination, creativity. I also teach design thinking. Now, these are subjects about the future. These are not subjects about the present. Now, somewhere along the line, we lost our imagination. If you remember when we went to school, we were all creative. And Sir Ken Robinson says that we were all creative when we went to school. Something happened there. Now, this is not to knock down teachers and knock down the way we learn, but unfortunately, all that we do in a school is we learn about the present. We learn about things as they are, not as they could be. We learn about sciences. And there is a reason for it, because we have to know about what's happening now before we can think about the future. But what happens there is the whole process of learning is about grades and about rewards. And so the more you learn by rote, and I think some people already covered this, the more you're rewarded. So what happens is we suspend our imagination completely. We stop thinking about the future. We stop thinking about fanciful things. We stop trying to imagine what things could be in the future. And this is what we do in school. We say 5 plus 5 is equal to, and everybody knows the answer. And if you know the answer, you get good grades. But what happens when you ask a question like this? What would give you 10? Now, this is the beginning of creativity. So it's not like, schools can't be creative. It's just that by the time we finish learning about things that are, we seldom get to the things about imagination and about the future. So, Einstein said this. He said imagination is more important than knowledge. Because knowledge is about what we do today. Knowledge is about what we have currently. But imagination is about what could be. So, the good thing about being an imaginative person is that you don't have to have any special education for it. You don't have to be, well-read. You have to just be able to question the status quo, question what is there, ask questions like, what if? What would happen if I did this? What would happen if I did that? Remember when you were kids, you asked these questions all the time. If I must tell you about my education, when I was in school, I was a terrible student, terrible. I went through 7 schools, and every school threw me out, and I think somebody already covered this. I spend more of my time out of the class than in the class. I spend a lot of time in the principal's room. I got more cuts on my knuckles than anybody else. And I started to think after a while that my name was get out of the class. I was just not fitting in. And there was a reason for it. Because I have a very short attention span. And I really got bored with things that were taught to me. And if that makes any sense, many, many years later, past my graduation in St. Xavier's College, so I was very happy to hear another alum from St. Xavier's College, I went to the US and I did my MS in communication. And there I got a 3.6 GPA on a 4.0. Now that should tell you something, because the system of education is different there. They allow you to, they ask you questions, what can you do with this information? So very often there, when you're learning subjects, like I studied communication, the exams would be a kind of a viva, where they would sit in a room and they would ask you, so how would you apply this theory to what you have, that you have just learned? And that would be an amazing thing. I would say, wow, I would love to tell you about this. And I would be fanciful about how I could learn, how I could apply this to other things. And that is where imagination really helps. That is where you learn how to use theories for the betterment, for taking it further. So, how do we stimulate imagination? Now, imagination is something that causes a chain reaction. It's a kind of a creative fission that happens, right? If you want to do a change, you want to have a movement, a revolution, you've got to start asking questions. That's the first thing you've got to do. And that is something we don't do enough. We are so reverent about everything. And this happens because when we learn subjects, the formal subjects, I mean, no one is going to question, for instance, the third law of thermodynamics. It would be stupid to do that, right? So we never really ask questions, because all of our education is about things that they are. And so the first thing you do is, this is what it is, learn it, say it back to me, and that's how you get your grades, and that's how you do well. So the first thing is to ask a lot of questions. And if you are still a student, and you feel that it's probably disruptive to ask questions in the class, no one has ever stopped you from asking questions in your own mind. Ask questions in your mind all the time. Wonder about things. Ask what if all the time. So let's take one at a time. Some of the questions that come to me: why can't we have skyways instead of highways? If you look at the roads outside, and you look at the way transport is changing, we are looking at alternate fuel. We are looking at how do we reduce the amount of traffic on the highway. And various cities, even Singapore had their own system of trying to reduce the traffic. Delhi tried it. But my question to you is, if you look at the whole concept of drones, which are happening, will the future have drones? If we have drones, will the highways be actually skyways? If that happens, how do we control traffic? Where will we park? Will we be parking on top of buildings? These are thoughts that you should be having about the future. Can we see with our ears? Do you think you can see with your ears? What do you think? In advertising, we actually create this all the time. Because when you do a radio spot, the first thing we are taught is write words, write a script that allows you to visualize, right? So when we do a radio script, and when you hear it, you can visualize. You take a person who does voice acting for a radio spot is not necessarily an old man. It could be a young person. But when they do that voice on the microphone, and you hear it, and you say, that's an old man, he's 80 years old, he's probably has gout, he can't walk properly. Where did you get this from? It's because your ears can see. Your ears can taste. Your eyes can do a lot more than just see. And when you use the 5 senses to do a radio spot, you can get much, much beyond what it's supposed to do. So you should ask a lot of questions. And if you ask questions, then you get the first level of imagination, because you don't have the answer. And you've got to start visualizing the answer. You've got to think of answers. So deconstruction. This is another stimulation for your imagination. What is deconstruction? You know, when you were little, and some of you still are, and when you're given a toy, the first thing you want to do is kind of break it up and look inside. Have you ever seen kids, you buy them a big box of something and you give it to them, and they open the box, and what do they play with? They play with the box, right? It's because they have imagination. So deconstruction is a great concept for stimulating your imagination. So if you take anything, whether it's an object, whether it's a system, whether it's banking, if you remember restaurants, right, the way that they are now, but there was also the fast food restaurants which evolved in the last 10 years. And what was really the stimuli for that? And it became well, you can talk about it as a chain reaction, because now you have fast food joints all over the world, right? And even in India. So what happened was somebody asked the question, what is a restaurant? And they deconstructed it. So a restaurant consists of tables, chairs, there are waiters, people come, they give you a menu, they bring you a glass of water, you drink the water, they give you the pickle, you eat the pickle, you order the food, food has not come, you drink some more water, you eat more pickle, you waste about an hour and a half, and then you go home and have a meal. I mean, you had a meal and you go home. But somebody said, wait a minute, what if we took away the waiters? What if we took away the tables? What if we took away the glass of water and the pickles and said, what do we like to eat? Give me 2 minutes, here's your meal, thank you very much, and you go home. That was a new model completely. And it happened because somebody deconstructed. And that is imagination. It's imagination at work, where you try to imagine what would a restaurant be after you break all the parts apart and look at it again and say, how would the restaurant be better? And that is imagination at work. And that started a whole chain reaction. What about books? In the old days, we would read books. We still do, but a lot of that has changed, as you very well know. And somebody asked this question, why do I have to carry 3 kilos of books on my back? Why can't I just carry, my iPad and have all my books in it? Because somebody asked a question. You deconstructed the concept of a book. The concept of a book is to have the written word in a way that you can read it, and you can shut it and put it away, and minus the weight, and minus the cost. The cost comes down dramatically. What happened to shopping? While shopping is still a pleasure to go and hang out with your friends in malls, you can still do it at home. And all of these models, and many, many more of these, happened because somebody deconstructed the current model and used their imagination to reconstruct it. So deconstruction, reconstruction is a great way to fire imagination and to get new ideas that can catch on and become viral. The last thing is brainstorming. Not the last thing, the last but one, is brainstorming, right? Now, you have heard of brainstorming, which is where you sit together in a room and everybody starts giving ideas. But brainstorming is slightly different. In fact, it's more effective. It's used a lot in designing new product concepts. What is brainstorming? You go and study the environment outside and try to understand what are the pain points that people have. What is bothering them? And then you try and convert that into an opportunity. You solve the problem using your imagination. And the moment you solve that problem, it becomes an idea that goes viral. It starts catching on. So if you look at the same thing as brainstorming as the restaurant model we talked about, or the ATM, the banking model we talked about, it still works the same way. Because once somebody said, why do I have to wait so long in a line? Why do I have to wait so long in a restaurant? I said, wait a minute, there is a better way to do it. And that pain became a gain. So pain is opportunity. So if that is another way of starting an idea which catches on, because if you can be sure that if you are suffering a pain of some sort in your life, like going to a bank or whatever it is, and if you solve the problem, you're going to give the benefit to millions of other people who are willing to pay for it. So it becomes a model that works. So meaning is a very, very important aspect of imagination. Now, as we have evolved as human beings, language evolved. But unfortunately, language didn't evolve as fast as meanings evolved. And let me explain that to you. For instance, if I ask you how many of you like fruit, right? I'll see a lot of hands up. A lot of you, everybody likes fruits. There you go. But now if I ask you how many of you like pineapple, I can be very sure that I won't see as many hands up. Because if you said you like fruit, and I say you like pineapple, and you say I don't like pineapple, I say, wait a minute, I just asked you like fruit, you said yes, you see pineapple is a fruit, but I don't like pineapple. Something is not right with the language. And that is how language works. Now, if I ask, have you got a pen and paper there with you? Yeah. So let me ask you, can you draw a chair for me? And take 5 seconds, because a chair is not a complicated thing to draw. 5 seconds. So, when I said the word chair, you imagined a chair, and all of you drew 4 legs, draw a backrest, a hand rest. You should have done that, right? Yes? Most of you? Okay, so that is a chair. But when you look at language, these are also chairs. And something went wrong in the way we imagine. Because when I say the word chair, we are triggered by heuristics, shortcuts, mental shortcuts, to say the chair has 4 legs, but that's not true. A chair can have 3 legs, a chair can have 2 legs, a chair can have no legs at all. What is a chair? A chair is something I rest my bottom on. That's a chair. And so if I told you to design a chair that is something like this, which gives me support, you would have thought of all of these things. But the reason you didn't think of it is because of language. Language traps us. Language traps us in meaning, which is not absolutely accurate. And that's, again, the impediment to imagination. So when you use words, they have meaning, but the meanings are limited to that word. And when you use that word to describe something or to think of a new idea, it's going to limit the way that you have ideas about solving the problem. So it's very important to write a brief for a product in a whole sentence, write a paragraph sometimes. I want to design something that supports my back and my bottom comfortably. The moment you say that, you don't think of 4 legs of a chair anymore. So that is another way you use imagination, right? By understanding how language works. Now, the world today produces a lot of engineers. If I'm not mistaken, India has more engineers than America and China put together. Huge amount of engineers. And ask me, I know this, because every year when we go for our interviews to look for new students in B schools, 80% are engineers. But there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being an engineer, except what we are looking for are more Imagineers. And to be an Imagineer, you don't have to clear SAT, CAT, and ZAT. You don't have to clear any exams. You just have to be able to be free in your mind, like you were a child. Imagineers are what create the future. Engineers are what execute that imagination, right? So I would like you to be more Imagineers than engineers. So when you say the word imagination, and you say it slowly enough, something interesting emerges. Imagine a nation. And what I'd like to leave with you today is this thought about India, a complex country with so many problems. Remember brainstorming? So can we look at India with all its problems, all its pains, and say, can I imagine a better nation? And the word imagination has a solution in it. Let's imagine a nation and not imagine excuses for a nation that we're not happy with or start complaining about it. So I would like all of you to consider this. And one of the ways to start this whole process is, in your school or wherever you are, have 2 bins in a public place. One bin says pain and the other says gain. And every day, if you find something that annoys you, the roads are full of potholes, I was carrying a milk packet, it fell and broke, whatever it is, write on a piece of paper and put it in the pain bin. And then the Imagineers, all of you are Imagineers because you don't need a degree for that, go into the pain bin, pick it out, and start working on a solution. And when you come up with a solution, put it in the gain bin. And if you do this process, you will start having an attitude of trying to solve problems rather than making excuse for problems. Okay? And that's all I have to say for today. So imagine a nation.